What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Community Corner podcast. I'm Arnav.
And I'm Nikhil, and today we're going to be delving into the intriguing world of offshore businesses.
Yeah, so offshore businesses, they're very complex and often misunderstood aspect of the global economy. And today we're here to explore what they are, how they operate, and I guess their overall impact on the world stage today.
Yep, offshore businesses can range from legitimate international operations to controversial tax strategies. So Arnav, for those of our viewers who might not be familiar, could you explain what offshore businesses are?
100%. So an offshore business, right? It's a company or entity established in a different country from where its primary operations or investments are based. And this is often done for legal, financial, or regulatory advantages like tax benefits or a more favorable business law. And I guess we kind of delve into other advantages later on in the episode.
Yeah, so I think a great example of how and where offshore businesses operate is companies setting in offshore financial centers like the Cayman Islands or Bermuda. So these jurisdictions offer lower tax rates and privacy, making them attractive for international businesses. And I know specifically in the U.S., the U.S. is known to have kind of a high tax rate at the national level. And so that's why a lot of the businesses in the U.S. do have their company headquarters or financial centers set up in other countries like the Cayman Islands.
Exactly. And I guess kind of what drives companies to go to offshore businesses, it's primarily about financial optimization, right? So companies seek to maximize profits, and offshore setups can offer tax efficiencies, asset protection, and access to global markets that they wouldn't have access to if they stayed in their local country.
Right. And so talking a little bit about kind of the benefits for the business, right? We mentioned the tax saving. I mentioned that in the U.S. there's kind of typically it's known for having a higher tax rate, especially. And it's kind of the same thing for a lot of other developed countries. It's diversified risk as well. And it's often less stringent regulatory environments. The controversies, though, are also kind of a lot. They're abundant. They involve issues like tax evasion. You might, if you're not kind of on the right side of that very thin line, then you might be subject to, going to court and things like that to explain yourself for those types of things, as well as secrecy and the potential for money laundering and other illegal activities to take place.
Yeah, a lot of people, I know a lot of startups or companies, if they have enough money to move, they kind of situate themselves in Dubai, where there's almost, I think, no tax on small businesses and startup enterprises, stuff like that, where countries like USA has a pretty high taxation rate for that. So it just kind of motivates and provides so many advantages for companies trying to do offshore businesses in other countries that's not their local company or local country.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing is especially big tech companies often engage in these offshore business practices, right? They kind of like to utilize these offshore subsidiaries to manage intellectual property and minimize tax liability. So it is a legal practice, right? Legal, not illegal, but it often sparks debate about corporate responsibility and tax fairness.
And I think that kind of sparks the question of ethical implications, right? And so people kind of argue that they can be regulated more effectively than they are, because right now there's so many loopholes that companies use in order to maximize profits, even in a sketchy / somewhat illegal way, right? But I think it's all about international cooperation. I think global initiatives and agreements like the base erosion and profit shifting, which is BEPS project by the OECD, they aim to tackle tax avoidance and ensure fair taxation.
Right, and I think looking into the future, which is obviously very important because I know a lot of our viewers are young, how might the landscape of offshore businesses change?
Yeah, so I think in the future, kind of in the years that are coming ahead, we're likely to see more transparency and regulatory cooperation, right? And so what does this mean? I think the implications of that are increased global scrutiny, digital reporting, as well as kind of the offshore world becoming more or less secretive and more compliant with international norms. Just kind of that overall compliant nature of offshore businesses and just a more transparent background with this topic and subject.
And I know we were kind of talking about the future here, and I think I want to mention my opinion on whether offshore is even a viable strategy for small businesses in the first place. I think for the most part, the answer is actually yes. I think small businesses can benefit from offshore opportunities. You're essentially entering a new market for optimizing costs. And I think the only thing that you need to be kind of extremely wary about is to just navigate the complexities and those kind of rough waters and terrain very carefully. You want to ensure compliance with all the legal and tax regulations. I know I mentioned earlier that you really have to be on the right side of everything that you're doing. It's a very thin line that you're walking. One wrong step, one wrong move, and you could be violating certain regulations or doing some sort of illegal activity. So just be very careful.
It's definitely a multifaceted issue with global, huge implications. So I guess final thoughts or things to take away is that offshore businesses are a part of our global economy, and understanding them is key to making informed opinions and decisions. And I think on that note, we're kind of wrapping up our episode. Thank you so much for our viewers or audience for listening in, for tuning in today with that enlightening discussion. So until next time, keep exploring and questioning the world of business.
Peace.